Good Erev Shabbos. Today is my 71st birthday. I've been getting messages from friends, family, contacts from all over the world, and I thank all of them for the good wishes. But I want to share a message, share a thought, share a feeling, share a truth with you. Many of you who see these videos see a guy with a beard with a crooked nose speaking in English but saying things that sound weird. I don't believe in evolution. Never have. I believe in an ancient document that there's so many questions about whether or not it was written by Moses, whether there is a historical basis for it or not. There's no evidence in archaeology for many of the claims of the Torah. And yet, I know those questions. So you think I'm just an ordinary bum. I am a bum, I guess. I quit college before my 18th birthday. I never returned to college as per at least the inspiration, if not the overt instruction of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. My passions are history and physics. Given an opportunity, I'd probably love to have entered those fields. Nonetheless, for the last 47 years, I've been working in the fields of education in various forms, Jewish education. Always at the same time knowing that there are so many questions, so many challenges to be Jewish. And I don't blame anyone who has questions for God. God, if indeed this is your word, why do you have to make it so difficult? The Torah is a document of relationships that was forged in ancient times, still has meaning today. But in practice, a lot of the things that were done in ancient times are not done today. For example, in women's issues, if you look in the Rambam, Maimonides, how women would stay home, how often they were allowed to travel, despite the perspective of the great teacher Maimonides that women are not like a prisoner in jail. Nonetheless, they would go once a month or once every couple of months to the outside. Just tell it to women today who go shopping every day and buy things and talk with people and teach people. The basis of the Torah, the words are the same, but the way in which it is practiced is not exactly the same today as it was then. The mitzvahs are the same, but the basic, simple faith that we had, that my grandparents had, my grandmothers had, that basic, simple faith isn't here today. You don't see it. People are cynical. I'm talking about religious people. People are cynical. People have become self-indulgent. Even while there exists today better access to understanding perspectives, better access to understanding archaeology and history, better access to understanding the sciences. I mean in a way that makes Torah consistent with the evidence that exists out there. So This week's Parsha is Parsha Shlach. There were 10 spies. Moshe Rabbeinu calls them, and the Torah calls them, Kulam Anoshim. They're all men of great character. Roshi B'nai Yisrael Haim. They're the leaders of Israel. The question is, how can leaders of Israel become so wrong? How could these people do things that are so terribly inconsistent with the ways of the Torah, at least the way the Torah describes them? Chassidus describes this as an ideological conflict between those who believe that one should study for the entire lifetime and not get involved in mitzvahs in the physical world, and the belief that you have to engage in the physical world. You have to grow crops, and you have to have land and till the world, till the earth. Rambam says that if you say that you're going to go ahead and be supported by tzedakah, did you take away the light of Torah, the more Shabbat Torah? You darken. That's what Rambam writes in Hilchos Talmud Torah. Still, you have an entire culture of people who believe it is their purpose to never work and to never have to earn a living and support their wives, despite the fact that they give their wives a ksuva. And this seems to run contrary to the way in which mitzvahs have to be practiced in poel, in actuality. You say, well, Rabbi, you do the same thing. I don't do the same thing. I run an organization. I have to work to run the organization. I have to raise funds, I have to do programs. I just can't sit and study like I would like to. But that's not the point. The point is that this was an ideological conflict between the spies and Moses. This would not show that perspective to be in good light. But they have a point. The Meraglim were men of great character. The Kulam Anoshim, Tzadikim, righteous people. You can't go ahead and say that they were wicked. That we need Talmidei Chachamim. We need to have Rabbonim, Dayonim, people who are expert in law. That goes without saying. But that everybody is fit for that process. It says 1,000 entered, one goes out to become a Rav. That means that 999 left the yeshiva and they went to work. That 1 out of 1,000 was chosen to become the lawgiver, the one who goes ahead and decides the law. That's what happened. The academies of the great rabbis were only populated extensively during the Yarchi Kala, during the month of Adar and the month of Elul. The rest of the time they were working. But this conflict between the spies and Moshe Rabbeinu was not a conflict between wicked people and righteous people, but between righteous people and other righteous people. Except that the other righteous people were on the side of Moshe Rabbeinu, on the side of Moses. So let's see what their arguments are, even in the stark, crude way in which it's explained in the Torah, which doesn't have the benefit of a perspective, of a Hasidic perspective. They said it was too difficult for them to enter the land. Now, how is that possible? How is it possible for it to be too difficult to enter the land when you've seen miracles coming from God? That's the question that we have in the Tehillim and all over. How could they have questioned that? And the answer is, had Moshe Rabbeinu said, Hashem yilachem lachem, God will fight for you, don't worry about it, then the spies would have accepted Moses' words. But Moshe Rabbeinu's words were, go and examine the place and see the place, how we can go ahead and approach it. Evaluate what's going on. Evaluate the worth of the land. Is the land worth that kind of a self-sacrifice of going to battle and war? See how approachable these places are. Make a natural assessment of what's going on. Naturally, it was a disaster. If you're talking supernatural, then they got nothing to say. But you go ahead and you want to make a natural assessment of the people and which way you're going to go and how you're supposed to approach the places and what kind of an army you're going to go ahead and take out. Those people were fortified and they were strong and powerful, knew how to do battle. We were a bunch of, not hippies, we were a bunch of old slaves. We had no knowledge of battle. These were seasoned warriors. They could take 100 of us to lunch, for lunch. If you want to go ahead and say that this is going to be a supernatural battle between God and them, okay. All I got to do is parade around, fine. But that's not what Moshe Rabbeinu was saying. Naturally, there was no way that we could fight them. And it goes on today. Today, conservative and reform rabbis, and maybe some modern Orthodox rabbis, maybe some secret Orthodox rabbis, look at history, look at Bible criticism, and they say, well, there's no way we can defend this. As a conservative rabbi, you said there's no evidence for the Exodus. And therefore, all we're doing is tradition. All we're doing is tradition, I want no part of it. It's either real or it's not real. So, Rabbi, how do you know it's real? So the answer is, I stood with Moshe. I stood with the Rebbe. I have no way of answering these questions. The evidence in historical documents, can I disagree with that? Can I find, there are people who can because they're expert in history. I'm not an expert in history. I don't know the documents, I don't know what they found. I've read a couple of things, I've given interpretations in what happened in Egypt with Nebuchadnezzar. I've interpreted what happened in Jericho to the best of my ability, according to the tradition. The others are all wet. But I don't know the answers to all these things. The reason why Joshua and Caleb said, we're going to go ahead and fight with our swords. We're going to go there with the blessings of Moses. What happened to God? Moses is God's agent. And if Moshe Rabbeinu says to go, you go. And you do what God wants. Despite the fact that there's no way that you can beat these people. But what happens is when you go ahead and you put in your own effort, then God blesses that effort and the supernatural occurs. During the 6-Day War, for example, which I didn't fight, I fought the battles of Torah. I studied Torah as best as I could during those years. But there were soldiers who did the battle, fought against the Egyptians. The Egyptians were powerful. They had an incredible tank corps. 700, 800 tanks buried in sand in strategic positions in the Sinai Peninsula. How did they get past them? They couldn't see them from the air to knock them out. So what happened was the Israelis decided to take a tactic that was unusual. Rather than confront the tank brigade through the normal road, they went up the sand dunes. Now, most tanks are not made to go up sand dunes. They can go up one sand dune, but a whole several miles of terrain of sand dunes, pretty impossible. And yet that's what they did. And they went around the positions of the Egyptians and caught them on the side, from behind and from the side. They unflanked them by going in a deceptive way, in a way that was not normal. And they shouldn't have been successful. But yet they were successful because they went for the sake of Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, and they had to succeed, otherwise we would be dead. And what happened was that God blessed their efforts. Didn't make any sense. How do you take tanks, a whole line of tanks, take them up sand dunes? They're not made to do that. They can do 1 or 2, 3, 4 sand dunes, but 100 sand dunes, you can't go up there that much. You get stuck eventually. Transmission won't go. You get stuck up on the top of the crest. You need helicopters to pull you out then. So how did it happen? Because they did what they were supposed to do, and God blessed the rest of their efforts. The Rebbe sent an army of soldiers. Make no bones about this. Make no mistake about this. The Rebbe sent out 2,000-3,000 soldiers. Now there are more than 4,000 or 5,000 soldiers. Double the amount that the Rebbe had while he was alive. 5,000 or 6,000 shluchim all over the world. Most of them, many of them never studied secular studies. They had to go out into the communities where speaking the English language, reading and writing, is part of normal function. Communicating with people who are sophisticated and learned requires a certain level of erudition. I know that I have some of that because I went to school, I went to college, and I've kept up with a little bit of things, and besides keeping up with the nourishes sports and everything else, I have what to talk about with people. But most guys don't have that. Some of the guys, well, some of the Lubavitcher guys like the sports, like the Knicks and like the Yankees. But most of them are totally oblivious to that. What can they engage? How can they engage the average American Jew to put on tefillin? Yet you see them succeeding. Succeeding beyond normal capacity, normal way that you would think a person could succeed. You know why they succeed? Because they listen to Moses, they listen to the Rebbe. Naturally, they were doomed to failure. I don't care how much enthusiasm you got. You come to a place where most rabbis are clean-shaven, and they have erudition, they're professional speakers, and they speak according to the sympathies of the day. They're not going to talk about keeping Shabbos and going to mikveh and avoiding having relations for half of the month because it's against the Torah. They don't have to worry about that. Now, they're very popular. And yet we find the most effective force in Judaism today are the Chabad houses. All over the world. To the point that yesterday in the New York Times crossword puzzle, they had as an answer, Chabad house, or Chabad. It's one of the answers to the crossword puzzle. Ami magazine ran a comic book of two kids that are lost on a desert island, And they're looking for a place to shelter, so they're looking for a Chabad house. But it's not a joke. Chabad is going all over the world. How can they be there all over the world if they're so unschooled? The answer is they're schooled. It's not schooled in modern day scholarship. But how can that succeed? It's doomed to failure. Same thing as the spies. The spy says, how can you enter Eretz Yisrael with your little sticks and stones, with your sling and your 5 stones, chamish avonim? You're going to go ahead and fight Goliath with a bunch of stones and a sling? God says go. And when you go, because God says, God makes you successful. What about those who got the questions? You have to go ahead and suck it up in the same way that you have the questions, how can you succeed? When you're totally unlearned and you speak with an accent and you go ahead and you break your teeth over English and you don't even know what the word definition means. The same way, approaching questions of religion and faith, we don't go with our own powers, we go with the power of Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu. I don't know the answers, and I'm bothered by the questions. But I also know that there was a holy Moses. And Moses and Moshe Rabbeinu went ahead and told me, if you do this, you'll be successful. And I didn't understand how I could be successful. I'll be honest with you, I'm 71. I'm still as shy as I was when I was 21. How am I going to go ahead and survive in a place that doesn't want religious people, doesn't like the way they look? I can't help it, I look religious. The same way that despite all odds, a Jew who goes for the Torah is successful. The same way, when you have questions, you have to also approach it that there is a Moses and there's something supernatural. And not everything has to make sense. What do you mean not everything has to make sense? Well, let me share with you a little insight. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't like it. As I told you, I'm a fan of physics. I'm fascinated by it all these years. According to physics, if you travel at the speed of light, time dilates. Time doesn't exist. And not only does time dilate, space dilates as well. The greater the speed, the more there's the dilation. That's the reason why cosmic rays actually hit the Earth. Even though, if you look at a cosmic ray, you know how long it'll last, the cosmic ray cannot last long enough to hit the Earth. And yet it does hit the Earth. The reason why it hits the Earth is because according to the conversions of time, space, time dilates and space dilates. It gets shorter. And so it hits the Earth before it expires. Cosmic ray does. Because time and space and length have dilated. Instead of being 10,000 feet, it appears like 5,000 feet, etc., etc. The same thing, even more so, when you have something that goes 186,000 miles a second, the speed of light. At that point, time doesn't exist. It does not experience time, nor does it experience length. What that means is that if you go at the speed of light, there is no time and there is no length. And how then does a light wave enter our world? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that as far as the light wave is concerned, there is no time differential between being emitted from the star and hitting the target. It can be billions of light years away. That's relative to us. But relative to the light of the star, it's instantaneous. How can I say that? You can see the light moving. Yes, you see the light moving. But that's only how you see the light moving. As far as the light is concerned, it's already hit its target. In fact, according to quantum mechanics, everything that goes at the speed of light goes all over the world. They've actually done experiments where it shows that all possible exits are used by a light wave. Unless you go ahead and put a camera in one place, at which point it will behave not like a wave. It won't go through the two places, it'll go through one place to where the camera is. At least the majority will go through the place where there's a camera. So that tells you that light is everywhere, goes everywhere. It's just relative to the receptacle, the reception thing of how it's going to be perceived and where it's going to be perceived. So here you have a situation where something doesn't exist in time and doesn't experience space and yet is there. So there is a reality of beyond time and space, even within time and space. Which then tells you that the world isn't exactly as the world appears to be. I don't know how it really is, but space-time, the space-time grid that we have, it's not an illusion, it's a reality, but it's a relative reality. It's only relative to us who don't travel at the speed of light. And therefore that can change a lot of things. Change the whole time discussion, the whole history discussion, the whole archaeological discussion, because they're irrelevant. They've discovered old bones of dinosaurs having fresh internal jelly, which should have been destroyed millions of years ago, if it's a million years old. And it appears to be fresh and new, as if these things had only recently died. There's so many new discoveries that they don't tell you. But all those discoveries add up to one thing, that the history of the Jewish people actually happened. And at the end of the day, there had to be a creator, and that creator had to have communicated his or its will to someone. Where is it? There's only one tradition that tells you that the creator of the universe came and communicated with the people. That's the Torah that Moses gave us. And despite all the questions, there are incredible discoveries being made in the Torah on a daily basis. Word analysis, patterns of 7 all over, and then equivalent spacings that predict events of history. So there you have it. The spies weren't bad people. The spies were sincere. The spies asked the obvious questions. We're not able to do this. And Moses says, yes, you can. You're able to do it because I said so. Because the power that I have coming through me is not my own, it's the power of God. And so all those who listen to me today, does everything have to make sense? The answer is no. But is there an answer, Rabbi? There's an answer. But the answer is that just because there's a question doesn't mean that the question remains. Just because there's a challenge doesn't mean it can't be overcome. Just because right now history does not allow us to see a certain perspective doesn't mean it won't turn around. In fact, many times history has shown just how exact the Torah is. And that's my message to you. Despite the difficulties, despite the questions, let's go with Moses. Let's rely on Moses. Because Moses has shown us consistently that God is with him and that the miracle takes place within nature.